devenir les nouveaux en immigration après vos discussions avec les provinces, avec les gens dans le milieu? Est-ce que vous sentez une pression?
Moi, honnêtement, ça dépend. Je pense que toutes les provinces, territoires ont leurs propres demandes à l'intérieur des rubriques, que ça soit plus d'autonomie, que ça soit plus de gens dans telle ou telle industrie. J'ai pas fait l'exercice, mais j'ose croire que si je mettais toutes les demandes ensemble, on serait bien au-delà du 400-500 000 de gens qui se trouvent généralement dans les visées de nos plans. C'est important pour le gouvernement fédéral d'avoir un rôle d'organisation, c'est notre juridiction, mais aussi de pouvoir cibler et guider la conversation sur l'acceptabilité sociale des immigrants, l'importance d'arrimer l'offre et la demande. Mais c'est clair qu'on voit des pressions dans toute situation où il y a des crises ou des défis, surtout dans la crise au logement. Puis il y a cette tendance de regarder le volume, puis malheureusement de l'associer à la réponse facile ou à une solution facile, c'est-à-dire l'immigration. Le défi, c'est de décortiquer tous les différents canaux, des façons dont les gens viennent pour contribuer à notre pays, et de se dire, bon, ben voilà, ce sont des gens qui contribuent de façon nette à l'accroissement du PIB, à assouvir les demandes dans les pénuries nuancées de main-d'œuvre à travers le pays. Si je sens la pression, il y a toujours une pression dans ce que je fais. Mais c'est clair que cette discussion est plus à l'avant-plan qu'elle l'était il y a 2 ans, je ne vais pas le nier.
Question sur l'immigration francophone. Il y a plusieurs organismes francophones qui vous demandent une cible de 10-12 %. Est-ce que vous ne sentez pas, si vous parlez de 6 % notamment, vous ne sentez pas que vous contribueriez au déclin du français au Canada ou au déclin du poids démographique des francophones si vous allez en bas de 12 %?
Bien, tant et aussi longtemps qu'on ne l'aura pas rétabli, je ne vais pas être satisfait du résultat. Pour moi, comme je l'ai dit à votre collègue, c'est d'avoir quelque chose qui est réaliste et réalisable. Puis je veux pas tomber dans le cynisme et faire une annonce qui ne serait pas réalisable sans avoir les mécanismes en place de pouvoir répondre aux défis, un défi très important. Alors, c'est la raison pour laquelle vous allez voir les niveaux qui sont fixés dans les quelques jours à suivre. Mais moi, mon défi au courant de la prochaine année, c'est de vraiment travailler avec mon département pour s'assurer qu'on a les mécanismes en place pour favoriser non seulement l'augmentation du volume, c'est-à-dire l'augmentation du numérateur, mais aussi de l'intégration qui n'est pas qui est un défi de taille. Hein. Vous n'allez pas demander à un couple parfait francophone du Vietnam ou du Cameroun ou de la Belgique du jour au lendemain d'être le porte-étendard du fait français du Québec. Ce serait présomptueux. Mais je suis sûr qu'ils le feront s'ils se trouvent accompagnés, puis dans une communauté où ils se sentent bien, ils ont accès à l'école et des ressources. Alors ça, c'est un défi d'intégration qui nous incombe, mais qui relève aussi des provinces.
Mari Wolf from the Globe and Mail.
Oui.
You said that housing affordability would be a key factor when you're talking about levels. You said that housing affordability would be a key factor when you're talking about working out the levels of immigration. But clearly they differ across Canada. I mean, the price of a flat in Saskatoon is very different from one in Toronto. Are you envisaging linking immigration to location or are you talking about broader restrictions based on housing affordability? If you could just expand on that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I don't think the thinking is I don't think simply we have the tools to be able to implement, or nor would it necessarily be desirable, particularly when you're only looking at one side of the equation. When you just look at the raw supply and say this is a supply of people coming to Canada, they themselves have capital, they're driving up the prices. That isn't the reason why interest rates have been hiked over the last few years, and it isn't the reason we are seeing certain spikes in certain regions of Canada. Again, what we are clearly trying to compose with is a skill shortage, knowing that skill shortage has not necessarily been properly rectified or addressed by the federal government or provincial governments, for that matter. I know my own home province, we went into the pandemic with a labor shortage, and we came out with a labor shortage, and we haven't properly addressed it, particularly given the particularities of the relationship we have with Quebec. I would say also, when we talk about affordability, we also have to, and planning, we also have to have the ability, particularly in rural regions, to accommodate people that are coming there to fill important gaps, whether it's maintaining a hospital that was on the verge of closing or a school. Those people need somewhere to stay. So that challenge is not insignificant, and it will vary from region to region. I think the strategic plan, and even if we had the best plan, plenty of governments would not necessarily follow it. But it is something that is important as a guide for us to look at where the challenges are and to make sure we're reflecting on it. So I don't want to confuse correlation with causation, and I don't want to pretend that this is a linear discussion, but it's certainly something we need to be sensitive to, particularly given the volumes that have generated, at least in the aggregate, these discussions that we're seeing that are more in the public eye in the last year or so.
On a different topic, I wonder if you could comment on your thoughts about the plight of Palestinians. I know there are many trapped in Gaza with family here who are desperate to get them here. I know it's difficult, obviously it's closed off at the moment, but there has been talk in Parliament about whether Canada should create a scheme as we did for the Ukrainians, and I wondered if that's something that is on the horizon or it's being discussed. And equally in Lebanon, I gather there are people who have family here, and of course the Canadian government has said advise them to leave, but there are long queues to get visas if the accounts of some families can be credited. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
I have a lot. I think that what's going on in Gaza is a humanitarian calamity. Our focus primarily as a government is getting out Canadians and their families from Gaza. There's a shade over 400 there that are trapped. That needs to be and remain our primary focus. We are planning for all eventualities and planning foremost to make sure that there isn't an escalation of the conflict, but we are planning particularly given the volumes of Canadians and family members that live in Lebanon to make sure that were something to arise, that we are properly prepared to respond quickly. Obviously, there's been no triggering event as of yet, but it's something that we are working on really hard. As to the theoretical, I don't want to entertain the theoretical of what happens if. We are trying to prevent the if, and I think that is and will remain the focus for now. But obviously, very conscious of what's been spoken about and in terms of potential resettlement. But again, I can't comment on it publicly at this time.
Hi, Minister. Yesterday, your department sent emails to the would-be Afghan migrants who still have applications pending and are waiting in Pakistan. The note told them to not leave their guest houses because of concerns Pakistan would arrest or deport them. It also told them to actually email your department if they do get arrested, and also noted that your department can't help them regularize their stay in Pakistan even if their application process to Canada is completed. Do you expect a migrant in a jail cell to be able to email your department? And what hope is there for these folks at this point, given you've reached your goal of 40,000?
So I do not presume that a migrant in a jail cell will receive any form of communication. I'm very concerned about particularly our clients that we make commitments to in Afghanistan, often living in really, really difficult conditions with fear hanging over their head. I briefly had the chance to speak to the interim government's Pakistan's Minister of the Interior very briefly on Sunday to express my concerns about the potential removal of Afghans into Afghanistan and my concern at that level. Obviously, in order for this to work and to get people to safety in Canada, it takes a working relationship. So it was a productive conversation. I am also very conscious of my role to be very careful in not lecturing people about their interior domestic politics. And it's something that for the sake of those that we are trying to serve and get out of Afghanistan, I'll be very judicious publicly in speaking about, Rafi. That said, it was a very productive conversation, and it's work that will be ongoing. I have said time and time again that the 40,000 number is not a ceiling in and of itself, because we do have to look at what our commitment was to Afghans and those who served us when we made it a couple of years ago, and to make sure we fulfill that to the best of our ability, knowing that we are working in a very difficult operational environment, difficult in Pakistan, difficult in other partner countries, but even most difficult inside Afghanistan.